A luxury Caribbean cruise ship. A couple seeking thrills. One dead body. This isn't your typical vacation gone wrong. It's a tale of desire, desperation, and death that will make you think twice about your next getaway. This is the case that rocked a small Minnesota town and sent shockwaves through the high seas of adult entertainment. It's April 2015, and the sun-soaked decks of an adults-only cruise ship are buzzing with excitement. The Crystal Serenity, a floating paradise of luxury and indulgence, cuts through the turquoise waters of the Caribbean. Among the passengers are Thomas and Sarah Johnson, a couple from small-town Minnesota. Thomas, a 45-year-old realtor, is the life of the party. Charming, outgoing, and always up for an adventure. With his perfectly coiffed hair and megawatt smile, he looks like he just stepped out of a real estate brochure. Sarah, his librarian wife, is quiet and reserved, a stark contrast to her husband's larger-than-life personality. Her mousy brown hair and nervous eyes make her almost invisible next to Thomas's vibrant presence. But don't let appearances fool you. This cruise isn't just about sunbathing and cocktails. It's marketed as an exotic getaway for couples looking to spice up their love lives. And Thomas? He's all in. The brochure promised a week of sun, sea, and illicit sex. A fantasy that Thomas had been nurturing for years. For him, this cruise is the ultimate playground, a chance to explore the wildest edges of his desires. Now let's rewind a bit. Back in Pine Grove, Minnesota, a town more famous for its cornfields and conservative values than for kinky escapades, Thomas was known as the guy who had it all. Successful business, beautiful wife, big house with a white picket fence, the American dream personified. His real estate business was booming, his charm winning over clients left and right. Thomas was the golden boy of Pine Grove, the local success story everyone loved to talk about. But behind closed doors, things weren't so picture perfect. Thomas had a taste for the wild side, always pushing boundaries, always wanting more. His love for life's thrills extended far beyond his career and into his personal life. He was the first to suggest a daring activity, the one who always knew about the most exotic vacation spots. And when it came to sex, well, let's just say Thomas's appetites were far from vanilla. And Sarah, she was along for the ride, whether she liked it or not. Their 20-year marriage had been a study in contrast from the start. Where Thomas was loud, Sarah was quiet. Where he sought the spotlight, she preferred the shadows. But over the years, the differences that once made them a perfect match had turned into a chasm of resentment and fear. Thomas's controlling nature had surfaced more and more in recent years. Friends described him as someone who always got his way, especially in relationships. And Sarah, well, she had spent 2 decades being the perfect, supportive wife. But the strain was showing. The light in her eyes had dimmed, replaced by a weariness that spoke volumes about their marriage. Fast forward to April 14, 2015. It's 9 a.m., and Maria Gonzalez, a 32-year-old housekeeper from San Juan, Puerto Rico, is making her usual rounds on the Crystal Serenity. She's been working on cruise ships for nearly 5 years, and she's seen it all, or so she thought. She knocks on cabin 827, the Johnsons' room. No answer. She uses her master key and steps inside. What she finds next will haunt her forever. Thomas Johnson naked, face down on the bed. His hands are bound to the bedpost with heavy metal chains, the kind you'd find in a hardware store, not on a luxury cruise ship. There's a gag in his mouth, silencing any screams he might have made. A pillow is pressed tightly over his face, and he's not moving, not breathing, not alive. For a moment, Maria stands frozen, her mind refusing to process the scene before her. Then reality hits, and her scream echoes through the hallway. Within minutes, the ship is in lockdown. Passengers whisper and speculate as the crew tries to keep calm. Rumors spread faster than a norovirus on a cruise ship. Was it a sex game gone wrong? A robbery? A lover's quarrel turned deadly? By 10:30 a.m., Detective Miguel Rivera and his team from the Virgin Islands Police Department are on board, ready to unravel this twisted vacation mystery. Rivera, a seasoned investigator known for his sharp instincts and methodical approach, has seen his fair share of crime scenes. But as he steps into cabin 827, he's hit with a gut feeling. This is no accident, no simple case of kinky play gone too far. The room is too clean, almost sterile. The air reeks of cleaning products. It's clear, whoever did this knew what they were doing. They took time to sanitize the scene, to erase their tracks. This wasn't a crime of passion, a spur-of-the-moment act. This was calculated, cold, premeditated. But who and why? That's what Rivera needs to figure out. Let's talk suspects. First up, we have Sarah Johnson, the quiet, unassuming wife, always in Thomas's shadow. But could years of being pushed around have finally made her snap? When Rivera brings her in for questioning, Sarah is a mess. Her hands shake as she clutches a tissue, her voice barely above a whisper. She tells Rivera about the argument she and Thomas had the night before, about how Thomas had demanded she participate in a sexual act with another woman while he watched, about how she had refused, how she had spent the night walking around the ship's deck, staring at the vast ocean and praying for strength. But there's something in Sarah's eyes that makes Rivera pause, a flicker of relief. Could this mousy librarian be capable of such a brutal act? Or is she just a grieving widow, shocked by the sudden loss of her husband? Then there's Ryan Cooper, a smooth-talking investment banker from Long Island, tall, tanned, and oozing confidence. Ryan is everything Thomas admired. He and his wife, Emma, were part of the Johnsons' little adventure group on the cruise. Ryan and Thomas had hit it off immediately, bonding over their shared love for pushing boundaries. But could that friendship have turned deadly? When Rivera questions Ryan, he's struck by the man's calm demeanor. Too calm, perhaps, for someone whose cruise buddy just turned up dead. Ryan admits to being close with Thomas, even becoming partners during the cruise. He talks about the night before Thomas's death, about the uncomfortable situation that arose when Thomas demanded Ryan and Emma engage in a sexual act with Sarah. But Ryan insists he left early, returning to his own cabin with Emma. And don't forget Emma Cooper, Ryan's wife, a British yoga instructor with a serene exterior. But who knows what's brewing beneath the surface? She seemed uncomfortable with the whole wife-swapping arrangement from the start. Could she have taken drastic measures to end it all? Emma's questioning reveals a woman torn between loyalty to her husband and her own moral compass. She expresses sympathy for Sarah, admits to feeling overwhelmed by the sexual dynamics on the cruise. But there's a quiet resolve in her voice that makes Rivera wonder, could this calm yoga instructor be hiding a deadly secret? As Rivera digs deeper, the story gets darker. It turns out Thomas had been pressuring Sarah into increasingly uncomfortable sexual situations for years. The cruise was supposed to be the ultimate fulfillment of his fantasies. But for Sarah, it had become a nightmare. The night before his death, they had a heated argument. Thomas wanted Sarah to perform sexual acts with Emma while he watched. Sarah refused, tears streaming down her face. But Thomas wouldn't take no for an answer. How do we know this? Well, that's where things get even more twisted. 2 days into the investigation, a maintenance worker named Carlos Mendez finds a hidden camera tucked away in a storage room. And what's on that camera? Let's just say it's enough to make even the most seasoned detective squirm. The footage shows multiple sexual encounters between the two couples. It reveals the growing tension, the discomfort, and most importantly, it shows Sarah at her breaking point. This isn't just a murder investigation anymore. It's a dive into the dark underbelly of human desires and the devastating consequences of pushing someone too far. The videos, recorded without Sarah's knowledge, paint a disturbing picture of the days leading up to Thomas's death. They show Thomas's increasing aggression, his disregard for Sarah's feelings. They show Ryan's enthusiastic participation and Emma's growing discomfort. But most importantly, they show Sarah's transformation from a timid, compliant wife to a woman on the edge of a breakdown. As the days pass, Rivera pieces together the puzzle, the motive, the opportunity, the means. It all points to one person. On April 18th, just as the sun rises over the Caribbean, casting a deceptively peaceful glow over the crystal serenity, Rivera makes his move. Sarah Johnson is arrested for the murder of her husband. The quiet librarian from Minnesota is now at the center of a scandalous murder case that's making headlines across the nation. "Death on the Love Boat, wife arrested in kinky cruise killing," screams one tabloid. "Librarian by day, killer by night," asks another. The trial begins on October 12, 2015 in Miami-Dade County Court. The courtroom is packed with reporters, curious onlookers, and the families of both Thomas and Sarah. The air is thick with tension and the murmur of speculation. Assistant District Attorney Elena Rodriguez, a fierce 38-year-old prosecutor known for her no-nonsense approach, leads the charge for the state. She paints Sarah as a cold-blooded killer who planned the murder to escape her failing marriage. Rodriguez argues that Sarah had grown tired of Thomas's sexual demands and saw murder as her only way out. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Rodriguez begins, her voice sharp and clear. What we have here is not a case of self-defense or temporary insanity. What we have is a premeditated murder, carefully planned and executed by a woman who was tired of living in her husband's shadow. She presents the hidden camera footage as key evidence, highlighting Sarah's growing distress in the final confrontation on the night of the murder. Rodriguez asserts that Sarah had deliberately suffocated Thomas using the pillow as the murder weapon, taking advantage of his vulnerable position during what was supposed to be a sexual encounter. Sarah Johnson didn't just kill her husband, Rodriguez concludes, her eyes locked on the jury. She betrayed his trust in the most intimate way possible. She turned what should have been a moment of pleasure into an act of cold-blooded murder. The defense, led by public defender David Stern, a seasoned 52-year-old attorney known for his empathetic style, paints a very different picture. Stern argues that Sarah had acted in self-defense after years of psychological abuse. He describes Thomas as a controlling and manipulative husband who had forced Sarah into humiliating situations time and time again. My client is not a murderer, Stern tells the jury, his voice soft but passionate. She is a victim of years of abuse, of coercion, of being treated as nothing more than a plaything for her husband's twisted desires. On that night, Sarah Johnson didn't commit murder. She fought for her life, her dignity, her very soul. Stern brings in expert witnesses who testify about the psychological effects of long-term abuse. He presents character witnesses from Pine Grove who speak about Sarah's gentle nature and Thomas's domineering personality, and he uses the hidden camera footage to demonstrate the escalating abuse Sarah suffered. Throughout the trial, Sarah remains stoic, her eyes often downcast as she listens to the testimony. The woman on the stand seems a far cry from the timid librarian who boarded the Crystal Serenity months ago. There's a hardness to her now, a resolve born from months in custody and the weight of her actions. The Johnson family sits in the front row, their grief palpable. Thomas's mother, Margaret Johnson, breaks down in tears several times, unable to comprehend how the woman she once considered a daughter could have killed her son. She was so quiet, so sweet, Margaret sobs during a recess. How could she do this to our Thomas? For 2 weeks, the courtroom is a battleground of he said, she said, of hidden cameras and secret desires. The jury hears from ship staff, fellow passengers, and expert witnesses. They watch the disturbing footage from the hidden camera, seeing the ugly truth behind the Johnsons' seemingly perfect marriage. Ryan and Emma Cooper are called to testify, their own relationship clearly strained by the events on the cruise and the subsequent investigation. Ryan, his confidence somewhat dimmed, speaks of his friendship with Thomas and his shock at the murder. Emma, her yoga instructor, calm shaken, describes the increasing tension she observed between Thomas and Sarah. As the trial progresses, it becomes clear that this case is about more than just Thomas's murder. It's about the dark underbelly of desire, the dangerous games people play in the name of pleasure, and the devastating consequences when fantasy collides with reality. Finally, after 2 grueling weeks, the case goes to the jury. For 6 long hours, 12 men and women debate the fate of Sarah Johnson. Was she a cold-blooded killer who planned her husband's murder, or a desperate woman who snapped after years of abuse? The tension in the courtroom is palpable as the jury files back in. The foreman, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a stern mouth, stands to deliver the verdict. On the charge of second-degree murder, we find the defendant, Sarah Johnson, guilty. A collective gasp ripples through the courtroom. Sarah doesn't react, her face a mask of resignation. Thomas's family embraces, tears of relief and lingering grief streaming down their faces. The judge sentences Sarah to 50 years in prison without the possibility of parole. As she's led away in handcuffs, Sarah finally breaks her silence. "I'm sorry," she whispers, her eyes meeting those of Thomas's mother. "I'm so sorry, but is this justice or just another tragedy in a story full of them?" As Sarah begins her new life behind bars at the Lowell Correctional Institution in Ocala, Florida, the ripple effects of that fateful cruise continue to spread. The once quiet librarian now faces a daily reality of strict routines and limited freedom. She keeps to herself, finding solace in books and occasionally teaching other inmates to read and write. Back in Pine Grove, Minnesota, Thomas's parents, Robert and Margaret, are left childless, grappling with grief and disbelief. The house that once echoed with Thomas's lively presence now feels unbearably empty. Robert, once proud of his son's achievements, becomes a shell of his former self, rarely leaving the house. Margaret seeks solace in her church community, but the pain of losing Thomas remains a constant companion. Ryan and Emma Cooper's marriage crumbles under the weight of the scandal. Ryan loses his job at the investment firm, his reputation in tatters. Emma finds it impossible to continue her yoga classes as clients abandon her. They divorce, each trying to rebuild their lives separately, haunted by the memories of that ill-fated cruise. cruise. And in the small town of Pine Grove, Minnesota, people look at their neighbors differently, wondering what secrets might be hiding behind closed doors. The story of Thomas and Sarah Johnson becomes a cautionary tale, whispered about at dinner parties and dissected in local bars. The case serves as a chilling reminder. Sometimes the most dangerous waters aren't in the Caribbean, but in the depths of human desire. It forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about marriage, trust, and the lengths people will go to fulfill their darkest fantasies. So the next time you're planning a getaway, remember, paradise can have a dark side, and sometimes the real monsters aren't hiding under the bed or in the closet. They're right there beside you, wearing a wedding ring and a smile. As for the Crystal Serenity, it still sails the Caribbean, offering luxury and adventure to couples seeking to spice up their love lives. But in Cabin 827, where a pillow once silenced Thomas Johnson's final breaths, guests sometimes report a chill in the air, a lingering sense of unease. Perhaps it's just the ship's air conditioning, or perhaps it's a reminder that even in paradise, darkness can lurk just beneath the surface. The case of Thomas Johnson's murder on the Crystal Serenity cruise ship remains a topic of fascination for true crime enthusiasts and a sobering lesson for couples everywhere. It raises uncomfortable questions about the nature of desire, the limits of trust, and the potentially devastating consequences of pushing boundaries too far. As we close the book on this chilling tale, we're left to wonder, how well do we really know the person sleeping next to us? What secrets lie behind the facade of a perfect marriage? And at what point does the pursuit of pleasure become a dance with death? The answers, like the vast expanse of the Caribbean Sea, remain murky and mysterious. But one thing is clear: the next time you hear about a luxury adults-only cruise promising to fulfill your wildest fantasies, you might want to think twice before booking your ticket. After all, some desires are better left unexplored, some boundaries better left uncrossed. Because as Thomas and Sarah discovered, sometimes the price of forbidden pleasure is far higher than anyone is prepared to pay. This is True Crime Case Files, reminding you that in the game of life and love, not all that glitters is gold, and not all vacations have happy endings. Stay safe, stay informed, and remember, the most dangerous predators often wear the friendliest smiles. If you enjoyed this case, then make sure to watch the next one shown on screen.